अस्सलामुअलैकुम। पिछले लेक्चर में हम CMM सॉफ्टवेयर के ऊपर बात कर रहे थे, यानी कैपेबिलिटी मैच्योरिटी मॉडल सॉफ्टवेयर के ऊपर। और ये जिक्र मैंने लेक्चर के एंड पे भी और दौरान भी किया था कि CMM सॉफ्टवेयर वाज अ ह्यूज सक्सेस। इसके नतीजा में सॉफ्टवेयर इंडस्ट्री में एक बहुत बड़ी अवेयरनेस पैदा हुई कि प्रोसेसेस को इम्प्रूव करना है, सॉफ्टवेयर डेवलपमेंट के, सॉफ्टवेयर मैनेजमेंट के और सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियरिंग के मुख्तलिफ एस्पेक्ट्स के जो प्रोसेसेस हैं उसमें उनको इम्प्रूव करना है। और एज अ रिज़ल्ट अ नंबर ऑफ प्रोसेस इम्प्रूवमेंट प्रोग्राम्स वर प्रपोज्ड and are being used in the software industry. तो CMM का जो बेसिक यूज़र था वो डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ डिफेंस था और उन्होंने मैंडेट किया कि सॉफ्टवेयर प्रोड्यूस करने के लिए, सॉफ्टवेयर एक्वायर करने के लिए या फॉर लार्ज सॉफ्टवेयर प्रोजेक्ट्स वेंडर्स शुड यूज़ CMM। और उसके ऊपर उन्होंने असेसमेंट्स करवाई और बहुत सारे वेंडर्स जो हैं उन्होंने उस मॉडल को अडॉप्ट किया। इसी तरह फिर सॉफ्टवेयर CMM की सक्सेस के बाद एक वक्त आया कि इसमें भी इम्प्रूवमेंट की ज़रूरत पड़ी और सॉफ्टवेयर और दूसरे जो मैच्योरिटी मॉडल्स थे जिनके ऊपर मैं अभी थोड़ी देर में बात करूंगा, उनको कंबाइन करके एक कैपेबिलिटी मैच्योरिटी मॉडल इंटीग्रेशन या CMMI मॉडल को प्रपोज किया गया। और अब CMM सॉफ्टवेयर एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता, लेकिन CMMI या कैपेबिलिटी मैच्योरिटी मॉडल इंटीग्रेशन एग्जिस्ट करता है और इसके ऊपर हम आज के लेक्चर में बात करेंगे। So CMMI is a process improvement approach that provides organizations with the essential elements of effective processes. अब CMM भी ये चीज़ें प्रोवाइड करता था, लेकिन as the time grows, as the industry matures, there is always need for improvement even within the improvement process improvement program. So CMMI is a natural next step for CMM. It can be used to guide process improvement across a project, a division, or an entire organization. CMMI helps integrate traditionally separate organization functions, set of process improvement goals and priorities, and provides guidance for quality processes, and provide a point of reference for appraising current processes. ये तो वही कॉमन गोल्स हैं जो कि CMM भी इसके साथ शेयर करता था, लेकिन हम जो उनके डिफरेंसेस हैं वो भी थोड़ी देर में आगे चल के डिस्कस करेंगे। पहले मुझे इसको थोड़ा सा इंट्रोडक्शन करवाने दें। तो एट दिस पॉइंट CMMI प्रोडक्ट suite is at the forefront of process improvement because it provides the latest best practices for product and service development and maintenance. यहाँ पर सॉफ्टवेयर CMM से इसका फ़र्क आपको पता लगना चाहिए कि सॉफ्टवेयर CMM was not dealing with the service aspects of process improvement. So CMMI model improves the best practices of previous existing models in many important ways. तो अगर आप intuitively इसको देखें कि ना सिर्फ ये कि CMM सॉफ्टवेयर की प्रैक्टिसेस को ये इम्प्रूव करता है, बल्कि इट इम्प्रूव्स प्रैक्टिसेस इन अदर एरियाज आल्सो। CMMI बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस enable organizations to more explicitly link management and engineering activities to meet their business objectives. These best practices help in extending or expanding the scope and the visibility into the product life cycle and engineering activities to ensure that the product or services meet customer expectations and actually exceed customer expectations, because that's the ultimate goal. These best practices incorporate lessons learned from additional areas of best practices. फॉर एग्जांपल मेजरमेंट्स हैं, रिस्क मैनेजमेंट है और सप्लायर मैनेजमेंट है. These best practices implement more robust, high maturity practices, address additional organizational functions which are critical to their product and services, and they're more fully compliant with relevant ISO standards. एक बात और भी है कि CMM सॉफ्टवेयर के हवाले से कि CMM सॉफ्टवेयर की ISO स्टैंडर्ड्स के साथ एक डिस्कनेक्ट थी. These were two vertical parallel standards. तो CMMI की जो best practices हैं, they comply with more relevant ISO standards. तो एक meshing of standards भी है इस मॉडल के अंदर. अब हम ये बेसिक इंट्रोडक्शन प्रोवाइड करने के बाद देखते हैं कि CMMI का बैकग्राउंड क्या है. थोड़ी सी बात मैं पहले कर चुका हूँ. फंडामेंटली CMM सॉफ्टवेयर था और उसके ऊपर हम एक पूरा लेक्चर कर चुके हैं. उसकी एग्जिस्टेंस या उसके बैकग्राउंड के ऊपर जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. लेकिन CMM सॉफ्टवेयर की सक्सेस के बाद एक नया मॉडल डेवलप किया गया. उसका नाम CMM सिस्टम इंजीनियरिंग या सिस्टम इंजीनियरिंग CMM रखा गया. इसको SE CMM भी कहते हैं. फिर सॉफ्टवेयर एक्विजिशन के लिए यानी कि सॉफ्टवेयर को अक्वायर करने के लिए एक कैपेबिलिटी मैच्योरिटी मॉडल बनाया गया. उसको SA CMM कहते हैं यानी सॉफ्टवेयर एक्विजिशन CMM. फिर एक इंटीग्रेटेड प्रोडक्ट डेवलपमेंट टीम CMM बनाया गया which is known as IPD CMM. Then we had system engineering capability assessment model or CCAM, and another model, system engineering capability model or SCCM, was created. And so you can see the success of software CMM created or resulted in research work into system engineering and acquisition and integrated product development and so forth. तो आप ये देख रहे हैं कि बहुत ज़्यादा मॉडल्स क्रिएट हो गए. तो जो इंटरेस्टेड पार्टीज़ थी, स्टेक होल्डर्स था, उन्होंने कहा कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा मॉडल्स हैं, इनको हम मैनेज नहीं कर सकते. So why not try to integrate these models? First of all, they decided not to create any more models. And a research activity was conducted into finding out if there are common aspects of these models. And then try to merge them into one model, and they named it CMMI, or Capability Maturity Model Integration. Obviously, this was a very huge and complex task, and we cannot go into the details as to what went on in creation of CMMI, but this was the background that in order for us as software practitioners, we should be able to look at the different processes that are used in system engineering, and system engineering people should be able to look at and benefit from the processes in software capability maturity model. And as users or as customers or stakeholders, we do not have to consider so many different models. We should try to integrate all of them and apply only those best practices which are relevant to their concerned project. तो ये इसका बैकग्राउंड था. तो फिर इसके नतीजे में CMMI क्रिएट हुआ. CMMI is a collection of best practices. इसके ऊपर पहले भी मैंने बात की है. It is a framework for organizing and prioritizing activities. Provide supports for the coordination of multidisciplined activities that might be required to successfully build a product. और ये चीज़ CMM सॉफ्टवेयर में अवेलेबल नहीं थी. CMM software was particularly focused on the software aspects of a project. And CMMI provides means to emphasize the alignment of the process improvement objectives with organizations' business objectives. That is, दफ़ा पहले भी इसके ऊपर मैंने बात की थी कि जो process improvement की activities हैं वो business objectives को meet करने के लिए create की जाती हैं, उनके लिए बनाई जाती हैं. इन themselves उनका कोई एग्जिस्टेंस नहीं होनी चाहिए. Process improvement in itself without having to meet the business objectives is a waste of time. तो कुछ थोड़ा सा हम रिव्यू ये कर लेते हैं कि CMMI model is not a process. It is a collection of best practices from highly functional organizations collected to help me and you and everyone who's interested in to improve our processes by describing what things or activities should be done in our organizations. So CMMI model describes the characteristics of effective processes और यही objective basically CMM software का था. The emphasis I'm making or references I'm making to CMM software is a very successful and very effective model in not only improving software but also changing the way we thought about software improvements. अब जो हमने देखा कि मुख्तलिफ मॉडल्स हैं वो इनपुट के तौर पर या सोर्स के तौर पर CMMI के लिए हैं. तो ये जितने भी सोर्स मॉडल्स हैं दे आर कंसिडर्ड कैपेबिलिटी मैच्योरिटी मॉडल्स. एंड ये भी एक इम्पॉर्टेंट बात है कि हर मॉडल की अप्रोच जो है वो मुख्तलिफ है. इफ़ यू केयरफुली एनालाइज and examine each source model, you would find that there are two types of approaches to presenting capability maturity models. These types of approaches have been labeled as representations in the process improvement community. Representation reflects an organization, use and presentation of component in the model. तो अभी हम देखते हैं कि ये जो दो representations हैं ये क्या है. All capability maturity models have process areas that are defined by different levels. An example of a process area is project planning. There are two types of CMI model representations, staged and continuous. और आज हम इन दोनों approaches को discuss करेंगे, obviously within the constraints of time. Two of the source models use other forms of the concept of a process area. The software CMM uses the term key process areas and SCCM uses the term focus areas. So terminology may be different obviously because they are different models. Stage representation क्या है? Stage representation is an approach used in software CMM. हम इसके ऊपर पहले पिछले लेक्चर में बात कर चुके हैं. It is an approach that uses predefined sets of process areas to define an improvement path for an organization. बड़ा set clear path होता है. There is no ambiguity. You want to go from level 1 to level 5. This improvement path is described by a component called maturity levels, and there are 5 maturity levels from ad hoc to optimizing. And a maturity level is a well-defined evolutionary plateau towards achieving improved organization process. तो जैसे मैंने कहा कि it's a very well-defined path. People know हम कहाँ पर हैं और हम कहाँ जाना चाहते हैं और एम्बिगुटी कोई नहीं है. दूसरी जो रिप्रेजेंटेशन स्कीम है वो कंटिन्यूअस रिप्रेजेंटेशन है. कंटिन्यूअस रिप्रेजेंटेशन इज द अप्रोच यूज्ड इन SCCM and the IPD CMM. This approach allows an organization to select a specific process area and improve relative to it. जो CMM सॉफ्टवेयर में अप्रोच थी वो ये थी, स्टेज थी, प्लेटोड अप्रोच थी. मैच्योरिटी लेवल के लिहाज से 5 लेवल्स डिफाइन थे. कंटिन्यूअस रिप्रेजेंटेशन में ये है कि आप एक एरिया को फोकस कर लेते हैं. आप कहते हैं जी लेट्स से कि आई वांट टू इम्प्रूव इन प्रोजेक्ट प्लानिंग फॉर एग्जांपल, एंड यू टेक दैट एंड यू ग्रो इन इट वर्टिकली. इन डीप प्रोसेस इंप्रूवमेंट आप करते हैं, फोकस्ड प्रोसेस इंप्रूवमेंट करते हैं. द कंटिन्यूअस रिप्रेजेंटेशन uses capability levels instead of maturity levels to characterize improvement relative to an individual process area. तो अगर आपने एक process area select किया है तो उसके अंदर आपकी capability कितनी है ये determine किया जाता है in CMMI. तो अब हमने एक थोड़ा सा basic difference देख लिया है इन दो presentation स्कीम्स में जो कि CMMI में है। अब मैं आपके साथ CMMI का मॉडल स्ट्रक्चर शेयर करता हूँ। Primarily it consists of 4 things. It consists of maturity levels or for stage representation or capability levels for continuous representation. So that is the first part of the structure. Then there are process areas, that's the second part. The third part is goals, which can be generic or specific. And the fourth is practices, which can be generic and specific. अब हम इन जो structural elements हैं इनको डिटेल से देखते हैं, both with respect to stage representation as well as continuous representation. तो पहले हम staged representation को देखते हैं कि CMMI में staged representation के जो components हैं उनकी क्या आपस का relationship है। तो इस वक्त आप स्क्रीन पे CMMI मॉडल कंपोनेंट स्टेज रिप्रेजेंटेशन का एक पिक्चर देख रहे हैं जिसमें मैच्योरिटी लेवल्स टॉप के ऊपर हैं एंड फॉर ईच मैच्योरिटी लेवल देयर आर प्रोसेस एरियाज। फॉर ईच प्रोसेस एरिया देयर आर specific goals and generic goals, and for specific goals there are specific practices, and for generic goals there are generic practices. So this diagram is a very good example of describing how components in CMMI model are structurally organized. The stage representation offers a systematic, structured way to approach process improvement one step at a time. You have these levels. First you have to specialize in one level and then you move forward at higher level. So achieving each stage ensures that an adequate improvement has been laid as a foundation for the next stage. So this is very similar to the CMM software approach. And the process areas are organized by maturity levels that take much of the guesswork out of the process improvement. So there is clarity in staged representation. And so this staged representation prescribes the order of implementing each process area according to the maturity levels. Obviously, जो lower stages हैं वो पहले आप implement करेंगे उसमें process areas को और उसके बाद फिर आप higher stages के ऊपर जाएंगे. And so this clearly defines the improvement path for an organization from the initial level to the optimization or optimizing level. Achieving maturity levels ensure that adequate improvement foundation has been laid for the next maturity level, and it allows for lasting incremental improvement. And so this is a very clearly set path from going at starting at lower levels and improving the maturity of the organization through process improvement. So what is a maturity level? A maturity level signifies the level of performance that can be expected from an organization. तो अगर एक organization एक खास maturity level के ऊपर है तो ये उसके तवक्को की जाती है कि उस level में जितने process areas हैं वो उसने implement कर लिए हैं. There are 5 maturity levels. Number 1, ad hoc. Number 2 is managed. Number 3 is defined. Number 4 is quantitatively managed. And number 5 is optimizing. ये उनके नाम हैं. इनके ऊपर हम थोड़ी सी देर में बात करते हैं कि इनमें क्या चीज़ें हैं. अब हम process areas को लेते हैं. Each maturity level consists of several process areas. जैसा कि आपने उस पिक्चर में भी देखा था. A process area is a group of practices or activities performed collectively in order to achieve a specific objective. और हर process areas में goals हैं. जैसा कि आपने उस पिक्चर में भी देखा था. Each process areas has several goals that need to be satisfied in order to meet the objectives of the process areas. और जो goals हैं, they are of two types. Specific goals वो हैं that relate only to a specific process area, जबकि generic goals वो goals हैं that are common to multiple process areas throughout the model. These goals help determine whether the process area has been institutionalized or not. Next structural element जो CMMI का है वो practices हैं. Practices are activities that must be performed to satisfy the goals of each process area. Each practice relates only to one goal. And there are two types of practices. Specific practices are those practices which relate to specific goals, and generic practices are associated with generic goals. तो ये हमने वो अभी तक डिस्क्रिप्शन देखी है उस पिक्चर की जो मैंने आपको शुरू में दिखाई थी स्टेज रिप्रेजेंटेशन की. अब हम उन लेवल्स की बात करते हैं, मैच्योरिटी लेवल्स की. लेवल 1 इज़ एड हॉक. ये वही लेवल है जो कि CMM सॉफ्टवेयर में भी है. देयर आर नो प्रोसेस एरियाज एंड ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस बेसिकली परफॉर्म their tasks or their projects in an ad hoc fashion. The practices are not followed, some practices are followed, some are not followed, and typically the success depends on the enthusiasm, hard work of individuals without following described or documented practices. Level 2 is defined. इसका नाम defined है. Here, organizations are adhering to their policies. They are following a documented plan and process description. They are applying adequate funding and resources. They are maintaining appropriate assignment of responsibility and authority. And they are training people in appropriate processes. So you see that there is marked improvement from ad hoc level to defined level. And they are placing work products under appropriate configuration management. So the concept of configuration management is available, and we know by our discussions earlier in this course that configuration management program is a very important and integral part of software quality assurance. And organizations are monitoring and controlling process performance and taking corrective action, objectively reviewing the process, work products, and services, and addressing non-compliance. So if there is non-compliance, they worry about it. And they're reviewing the activities, status, and results of the process with appropriate levels of management and taking corrective actions. And organizations are identifying and interfacing with relevant stakeholders. So you can notice the improvement from ad hoc level to level 2. Level 3 is managed. The organization has achieved all of the goals of level 2. There is an organizational way of doing business with tailoring of this organizational method allowed under predefined conditions. The organization has an organization's set of standard processes. इसको हम OSSP भी कहते हैं कि organization has a way of doing its business. The following characteristic of the process are clearly stated. Number 1, purpose of the process. Then they have inputs, entry criteria, activities, roles, measures, verification steps, outputs, and exit criteria. So we see that the processes are clearly defined and they have clearly specified entry criteria, activities, and outputs and exit criteria. And they also have documented the measures they want to collect, the verification steps before they exit the process. Level 3 continues with defining a strong, meaningful organization-wide approach to developing products. An important distinction between level 2 and level 3 is that at level 3, processes are described in more detail and more rigorously than at level 2. Processes are managed more proactively based on a more sophisticated understanding of the interrelationships and measurements of the processes and parts of the processes. So there is in-depth knowledge and understanding of processes at level 3 that did not exist at level 2. So we can say that level 3 is more sophisticated, is more organized, and establishes an organizational identity. What is an organizational identity? Organizational identity is described by following the way or developing a way of doing business which is particular to this organization. For example, organization A can have its identity by defining the processes and institutionalizing the processes organization-wide. And so we can say whenever we talk about products or activities of organization A, we know that they have a certain way of doing business and everyone follows that. At level 4, which is named quantitatively managed, the organization controls its processes by statistical and other quantitative techniques. Product quality, process improvement, process performance, and service quality are understood in statistical terms and are managed throughout the life of the processes. And so at level 3, we were more concerned about defining, improving processes organization-wide. And at level 4, our focus has shifted from institutionalizing processes to quantitatively managing these processes. Level 5 is optimizing. Processes are continuously improving based on the understanding of common causes of variation within the processes. Everyone is a productive member of the team, defects are reducing, and your product is delivered on time and within the estimated budget. So some people would like to call it that level 5 is nirvana, that every product is produced within the constraints of time and budget, with the quality is improving with every software project that is undertaken, and the defects are reducing with every project. So there is continuous improvement, and it is visible to all members of the software development team and other work also. For example, system engineering and other teams also. Let us now talk a little bit about continuous representation. CMM software differs with CMMI in that CMM software did not have any continuous representation. It only had staged representation. CMMI model components in continuous representation. Here you can see that you have process areas, and within each process area you have specific goals and generic goals, and within each specific goal you have specific practices, and within each generic goal you have generic practices. And also on the side you see capability levels, which are not maturity levels, and they are a little bit distinct from process areas. So we will now talk about, we'll try to describe this picture and so we can get more information about different elements of CMMI model components in continuous representation. The continuous representation offers a flexible approach to process improvement. इसमें और staged में अब मैं थोड़ा सा फ़र्क भी आपको बताता हूँ कि जो staged representation है उसमें सबसे पहले एक maturity level है, लेकिन इस diagram में आपने कोई maturity level नहीं देखा. जो भी organization ये decide करे कि they want to improve their performance in a specific area, they can do so. And so this is the flexibility that continuous representation provides over the staged representation. So an organization may choose to improve the performance of a single process-related trouble spot, or it can work on several areas that are closely aligned to organization's business objectives. The continuous representation also allows an organization to improve different processes at different rates. कोई ज़रूरी चूँकि उनके लिए नहीं है कि वो एक लेवल के ऊपर हों, इसलिए let's say कि उनके नज़दीक project planning जो है वो ज़्यादा important है. So they can give more, allocate more resources and have a shorter time for improvement for project planning as compared to, let's say, quality assurance or configuration management. I'm not saying one is more important or the other. I'm just saying that if an organization has the ability to focus their attention and allocate the necessary funding and other resources to one key process area over others. So, they can achieve much more maturity in or capability in specific or in the chosen process area as compared to the others. However, there are some limitations on organizations' choices because of dependencies among some other process areas. Obviously, when you have these process areas, some of them are dependent on others. तो अगर आप मसलन जो quantitative या measurement से related process areas हैं, उनके लिए आपको पहले processes को define करके, उसको focus करके, उसको institutionalize करके, उसके बाद ही फिर आप measurements वगैरह की तरफ जा सकते हैं. However, the continuous representation uses the same basic structure as stage representation, जो कि आपने अभी picture में भी देखा है कि ultimately these are best practices, specific best practices, generic best practices, then you have specific goals at higher level, generic goals, and then you have process areas. जो lower end के ऊपर जो diagrams, pictures हमने देखी हैं, they are same. Top के ऊपर उसमें फ़र्क है. इसमें एक difference है जो कि staged में नहीं था, और वो ये है कि जो process areas हैं, they belong to process area categories. A process area category is just a simple way of arranging process areas by their related primary functions. क्योंकि जैसा कि अभी मैंने बताया था कि process areas में भी dependencies हैं, और अगर उनको हम carefully analyze करें तो हम उनको organize कर सकते हैं under process area categories. Capability levels are also used to measure the improvement path through each process area from an unperformed process to an optimizing process. आपने वो diagram में देखा था कि on the right hand side there was detached capability levels that was shown in the picture. For example, an organization may wish to strive for achieving capability level 2 in one process area and capability level 4 in another. और ये वो चीज़ है जो हमें सिर्फ continuous presentation में कर सकते हैं, staged में हम नहीं कर सकते. As the organization's process reaches a capability level, it sets its sights on the next capability level for that same process area, or decides to widen its scope and create the same level of capability areas for a larger number of process areas. So the flexibility available in continuous representations is much more than in the staged representation. अब process area categories क्या हैं? There are 4 process area categories. Number 1 is process management. The second is project management. The third is engineering, and the fourth is support process area categories. Let's now talk a little bit about these process areas in each of these process area categories. So the process management process area category has 5 process areas. Number one, organizational process focus. You can relate this process area to the process area in software CMM. Second is organizational process definition. Third is organizational training. Then you have organizational process performance and organization's innovation and deployment. So जो process management से related process areas थे उनको process management process category में उसके तहत उसको document कर दिया गया. Then the next category is project management. इसके अंदर obviously project planning है, project monitoring and control है, supplier agreement management है, integrated project management है, risk management है और quantitative project management है. The third process category is engineering. इसके अंदर requirements development है, फिर requirements management है. Then there is process area named technical solution. Then there is a process area named product integration. Then there is process area by the name verification, and finally validation. And one thing it is important to note that in engineering at least, these are listed in increasing order of complexity. So requirements development is simpler compared to requirements management, which is simpler compared to technical solution, and then finally validation is the most complex activity or process area. The fourth category is support. इसके अंदर configuration management एक important process area है, फिर process and product quality assurance है, then we have measurement and analysis, then we have decision analysis and resolution, and causal analysis and resolution. तो ये वो process areas हैं जो कि मुख्तलिफ categories के अंदर हैं. फिर goals and practices हैं. Specific goals and practices relate to specific process areas and relate to tasks that make sense for that process area only. So जो specific goals हैं और specific practices हैं, they are attached with each other. For example, project planning requires a project plan. तो project plan को develop करना एक practice है. Project plan जो है वो एक area है, process area है, उसके अंदर project plan को develop करना हम कह सकते हैं कि एक goal है और उसको actual develop करना वो एक practice है. Quantitative project management requires a process performance baseline. So you can see that specific goals can only be met by specific practices. On the other hand, generic goals and practices relate to multiple process areas और वो उस process area की overall achievement के लिहाज से important है. इसके ऊपर हम पहले भी बात कर चुके हैं, इसलिए इसको डिटेल में इस वक्त जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. अब आपने देखा कि जो CMMI है उसकी दोनों जो रिप्रेजेंटेशंस हैं, स्टेज्ड रिप्रेजेंटेशन एज वेल एज कंटिन्यूअस रिप्रेजेंटेशन है, उसका हमने एक ब्रॉड ओवरव्यू डिस्कस किया है. ऑब्वियसली हम एक लेक्चर में उसकी जो स्पेसिफिक प्रोसेस एरियाज़ हैं या जो डिटेल्ड प्रैक्टिसेस हैं उसको हम कवर नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन इस एक लेक्चर में आपको एक बेसिक इंट्रोडक्शन CMMI का both from the staged representation as well as from the continuous presentations मिल गया है. CMMI जो है it focuses on institutionalization. Goals cannot be achieved without proving institutionalization of the process. Generic goals and generic practices support institutionalization and increasing sophistication of the process. And specific goals and specific practices support implementation of the process area. Process maturity and capability evolve. Process improvement and increased capability are built-in stages because some processes are ineffective when others are not stable. So you can see that there are dependencies within different processes. आप बाज़ processes को implement करना चाहेंगे, लेकिन उनको implement करने से पहले आपको बाज़ दूसरे processes को implement करना पड़ेगा, वरना आपकी जो foundation है वो सही नहीं होगी, वो foundation नहीं बनेगी, और foundation के बगैर जो भी आप practices ले भी आएंगे तो वो institutionalize नहीं हो सकती, implement नहीं हो सकती organization wide. CMMI का जो एक बड़ा मकसद है, और CMM का भी ये बड़ा मकसद था कि आप सॉफ्टवेयर को इस तरह डेवलप करें कि वो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता तमाम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में एक नॉर्मल तरीका बन जाए, यानी कि आप यू आर ऑलवेज फॉलोइंग दीज बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस. CMMI ने ये किया ऑन टॉप ऑफ CMM सॉफ्टवेयर के मुख्तलिफ जो एरियाज़ हैं, सिस्टम इंजीनियरिंग है और IPG है या एक्विजिशन है या सर्विसेज हैं, उन सब को इकट्ठा करके फिर उसमें से बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस सेलेक्ट करके और आपको ये ऑप्शन दी कि आप चाहे स्टेज्ड अप्रोच यूज़ कर लें, चाहे कंटिन्यूस अप्रोच यूज़ कर लें. और ऑन टॉप ऑफ इट जो बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस CMM सॉफ्टवेयर में नहीं थी, उनको भी CMMI में इंक्लूड कर लिया गया. ये भी एक फैक्ट है कि कंटिन्यूस रिप्रेजेंटेशन हैज़ द सेम बेसिक information as staged representation. That information is arranged differently. That is in capability levels, not in maturity levels. क्योंकि आपने अभी हमने जो डायग्राम देखी थी CMMI की कंटिन्यूस रिप्रेजेंटेशन की, उसमें जो फ्लो है वो बेसिकली प्रोसेस एरिया से नीचे जा रहा है, लेकिन ऑन द राइट साइड यू सॉ कैपेबिलिटी लेवल्स. The continuous representation focuses on process improvement, on actions to be completed within process area, जैसा कि मैंने ऊपर से अभी बताया है. Yet the processes and their actions may span from different levels. More sophistication is implementing the practices is expected at different levels. These levels are known as capability levels, और ये 6 होते हैं. इनके ऊपर हम थोड़ी सी बात कर लेते हैं. ये 6 लेवल्स कौन से हैं? लेवल 0 is incomplete. Level 1 is titled performed. Level 2 is managed. Level 3 is defined. Level 4 is quantitatively managed. And level 5 is optimizing. So what is a capability level? हमने ये levels बता तो दिया आपको, लेकिन clearly भी describe नहीं किया कि ये levels हैं क्या, ये capability levels क्या हैं. Capability levels focus on maturing the organization's ability to perform, control, and improve its performance in process areas. So process areas ही फोकस है कंटिन्यूस रिप्रेजेंटेशन का, लेकिन उन प्रोसेस एरिया की जो परफॉर्मेंस है उसको परफॉर्म करने, कंट्रोल करने और उसको इम्प्रूव करने के लिए जो लेवल्स हैं उनको हम कैपेबिलिटी लेवल्स कहते हैं. दिस एबिलिटी अलाउज द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन टू फोकस ऑन स्पेसिफिक एरियाज टू इम्प्रूव परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ दैट एरिया. हम ये कह सकते हैं कि प्रोसेस एरिया मसलन हम रिक्वायरमेंट्स डेवलपमेंट का लेते हैं. रिक्वायरमेंट्स डेवलपमेंट की जो कैपेबिलिटी है वो हम कह सकते हैं कि वो एक लेवल 0 पे है, लेवल 1 पे है, लेवल 2 पे है, लेवल 3 पे है, लेवल 4 पर है या लेवल 5 पर है. तो अगर आप इस व्यू से देखें तो ये एक वर्टिकल कैपेबिलिटी है with respect to that process area. An organization can be at level 5 for requirements development, and it can be at level 1 for project planning. It can be at level 2, for example, at quality assurance. अब इन लेवल्स के ऊपर भी थोड़ी सी बात कर लें. लेवल 0 जैसे कि बताया था कि इनकम्प्लीट है. एन इनकम्प्लीट प्रोसेस डज नॉट इम्प्लीमेंट ऑल द कैपेबिलिटी लेवल 1 specific practices in the process area that have been selected. This is equivalent to maturity level 1 in the staged representation. Level 1 is titled performed. A capability level 1 is a process that is expected to perform all of capability level 1 specific practices. Performance may not be stable and may not meet specific objectives such as quality, cost, and schedule, but useful work has been done. This is only a start or baby step in process improvement. It means that you are doing something, but you have not proven that it is really working for you. So you have done something, but you don't have the numbers, you don't have the assurance that you are improving. Level 2 is managed. You are planning, you are performing and monitoring and controlling individual projects. You are actively managing. You may have some metrics in place. And so the capability within that process area is improving and your projects are being actively managed. Level 3 is defined. A defined process is a managed process that is tailored from the organization's set of standard processes. Deviations beyond these allowed by the tailoring guidelines are documented, justified, reviewed, and approved. So they're in an organizational way of doing the work, and that differs from other organizations. And so the identity of the organizational activity is clear from the way you do things. Level 4 is quantitatively managed. This is a process which is defined by controlling and using the statistical and other quantitative techniques. Product quality, service quality, process performance, and other business objectives are understood with the help of statistical and quantitative data throughout the life cycle. Then you have level 5, which is optimizing. An optimizing process is quantitatively managed process that is improved based on an understanding of the common causes of process variation inherent in the process. So as you can see, the within the CMMI, if we apply or use continuous representation, we have these capability models as well that allow the processes to be operating at different levels and the process areas to be at a certain capability level and not at the maturity level. They are two different things. And so an organization may choose to be at level 5 for a certain process area because the business objectives require it to be at level 5, while some other areas, some other process areas which are not applicable or which are not relevant to meet the business objectives may be at level 0, for example. And so continuous representation allows organizations to choose those process areas which need attention and which are more relevant to meet their business objectives. Both the staged representation as well as the continuous representations are applicable, and both allow an organization to improve the process of software development within that organization. Both are documented, both are collection of best practices. It is the selection of staged representation or continuous representation actually depends on organizations' own culture, the background, and their business objectives. In today's lecture, we had a good discussion on what basically CMMI is, what are its structural elements with respect to stage representation, and what are the structural elements with respect to continuous representation. This brings the discussion on processes and process improvement to a conclusion. With respect to this course, obviously the process improvement is such a vast area that cannot be touched upon actually in a couple of lectures. But we have tried to summarize the different important aspects of process assurance and process improvement, and had an introductory discussion on CMM software and CMMI in the 3 lectures that we had dedicated to this very important and vast subject. In the next lecture, we will start our discussion on metrics. So I take leave of you until that time. Thank you.